What's going on, everybody? If you're an Enhancement Shaman fan like myself, then I've got some incredible news for you. Shaman got a ton of buffs last night. Now, we did get a couple little nerfs, but they're not enough to where they're options that you'd knock out anymore. But we'll go over it all live right here with you guys right now. So first things first, we'll get the bad news bears bit out of the way. They did nerf Forceful Winds, Wind Fury, a little bit more again. Recently they did that huge buff where they upped the AP scaling of Wind Fury by a lot, as well as made the legendary Doom Winds really powerful. They very quickly scaled that back down. Doom Winds getting a huge nerf, and they cut the AP scaling on Wind Fury a little bit as well. Well, unfortunately, it seems they felt that it was still too powerful, so Forceful Winds is now only doing 35% damage increase per stack of Wind Fury weapon for it. So it's really incredible to see that at the start of BFA, this was actually a 100% damage increase on Wind Fury weapon, and now going into Shadowlands, we are looking at it being brought all the way down to 35%. So that really just shows how much of an impact this legendary Doom Winds has the ability to put into Forceful Winds. So unfortunate to see it nerfed like that, but it's still doing all right damage. It's still going to be your go-to in AoE at the moment. But there are some really interesting things happening alongside it. Your other primary AoE ability, Hailstorm, also got a nerf. That one was originally 35% damage scaling increase per stack of it, brought all the way down to 15%. It is definitely not nearly as much of a hard-hitting single target ability anymore, but it is still going to be a go-to for AoE. It still does really nice adequate damage in AoE, but its single target damage just is not there anymore. So real quick, we'll show you guys how it is. Fire Nova, still not worth it, but we'll talk about that in a moment. That was also adjusted in the notes. There's just too much that they need to do to make it better. So here we go. We got 5 stacks up, Hailstorm, boom. So fortunately we got 2 crits out of it, so that Hailstorm actually did a lot of damage comparatively, but generally speaking, a normal hit is going to be around 1.7k damage, as you can see it there. A crit though is still going to hit you up around 4k, and so it's an AoE ability, so it's still going to be really strong in those group pack pulls. It's still going to be a really nice ability. Alongside that, Wind Fury weapon is still there. It's only a couple hits here. We'll get a larger test sample for Wind Fury weapon for you guys. It's still going to be a go-to in AoE scenarios, especially because Crash Lightning still has the ability to proc it potentially. But overall, it's still a really strong ability. We'll get a couple more Hailstorm stats for you as well here. So right there is going to be a more normal one. 3 targets, Hailstorm, no crits, 5k damage. So a lot lower from what it was before overall, but it's not bad. All right, but you can see here Wind Fury weapon is still doing relatively well. You're still getting up in that over 1k damage range on a Wind Fury attack once you hit those 5 stacks. So that's really good. That's really important that it's not being brought back down to the abysmal rate that it was, where on pre-patch it was doing only a little bit better than Flame Tongue in comparison. In fact, as you can see right here, Wind Fury actually outparsed Frost Shock in that short little window of time. So that's really awesome to see that it still is performing, and Frost Shock's still performing. But what's up with Lightning Bolt, guys? It's doing a lot of damage. Well, aside from those 2 nerfs, there were a slew of buffs across the board to the entire playstyle of Enhancement Shaman. Now, the biggest one is going to be our Maelstrom weapon spenders. This was a massive change to the class. For those who don't know, back when they, a little bit ago, they made a nerf to Maelstrom weapon spenders, where they nerfed the overall effectiveness of Maelstrom weapon spenders by 50%. So they have a negative 50% modifier on them baseline. Then they get that plus 20% per stack of Maelstrom weapons. So you actually have to get 3 stacks of Maelstrom weapon originally in order to even get back into that positive range of what its base value was for a contributing amount. Well, they have gone ahead and they have buffed that, and it is now only minus 35%. So was minus 50%, now it's minus 35% on that damage reduction to our, or healing to our Maelstrom weapon spenders. Now, the 2 biggest ones out of this is that they actually entirely removed this negative modifier from healing surge and from swelling waves. So those are really big in terms of our survivability and our self-healing. And so now our Maelstrom weapon spending abilities actually feel really good to use between our lightning bolts, our chain lightnings, and our healing in particular. Especially our healing is actually really awesome right now. And for the first time in a long time, I really actually feel like a full-blown hybrid class. Like I'm actually a shaman, like I'm full-blown hybrid. We haven't had this feeling in a long time. You know, the last 4 years was a lot of just hitting Storm Strike nonstop, while our healing, you know, ended up being a little bit lackluster because they just made it instant cast across the board as long as we had Maelstrom, but its amount was still just really bad. So ignore that. I know you're catching that. Okay, so real quick, we'll give you a little show of what the damage looks like coming out now from a lightning bolts with 5 stacks of Maelstrom. It's actually really nice to see overall. It does a nice bit of damage. So 2600, really nice little single target, instant cast, ranged ability. You know, really gives you an effective tool from range when you have the stacks available for it. That being said, let's say now you're in a tough situation where you need to heal. Well, with Earth Shield up, your heal, well, we crit, so 22k, and then an 11k swelling waves follow-up. So that is a total of 33,000. Well, our health bar is 30,000. So we just full healed on one ability with 5 Maelstrom weapon stacks. Now that's not what's going to be the normal, but standardly it's usually going to hit for around 12k, and it's going to have a swelling waves follow-up 11.5 for around 5.5 to 6k as well. So that's still going to be around a 18k heal, which is still a little bit more than half your health. So they're, at least I like to think, acknowledging the fact that we only have 1 defensive cooldown that can't be even used when you're stunned, and they're giving us a nice bit of self-healing again in place of it in order to give us that survivability that we've been lacking for a while now as enhancement specifically. So that's been really awesome. This was overall probably the biggest change. To go alongside it, this Maelstrom weapon modifier does also affect Elemental Blast, for those of you who are aware of that. Well, alongside that, Elemental Blast also got a 25% damage modifier boost baseline. So Elemental Blast is now actually one of our most insane hard-hitting single target abilities. In fact, it's actually our hardest hitting single target ability. Real quickly here, show it up for you guys right there. It just crit 9.7k. That's an awesome amount of damage to have on a single target ability coming out for us. Unfortunately, I do think because of that, it might probably see a little bit of a nerf. It would be awesome if it went live like that, but that's a really nice hard-hitting ranged ability. In fact, it hits harder than any of our melee abilities, which is a little wild to see, but you know, especially because it's not physical damage, so it's not mitigated by armor or anything like that. So, and it, you know, so it scales with our mastery, and it scales with other things that interact with our class as well. So those are the first 2 big main huge buffs that came out with the notes. Following up on that though, you guys know how feral spirits have just been absolutely pitiful for all of BFA, and they just don't do anything but go rawr. Well, they actually buffed the AP scaling of feral spirits by 250%. So Unfortunately, if you actually look at it overall, the damage that they do, I have elemental spirits on right now for something that I was testing. So for those of you who are wondering, fire wolves, lava wolves, they increase fire damage by 20%. It actually affects elemental blast. So elemental blast actually does 20% more damage per fire wolf that's out. So you can hit really high elemental blasts, assuming your RNG is lucky enough. But if you go ahead, throw it in over the course of that entire duration, the 2 elemental wolves only did about 5.2k damage. Now that's 5.2k damage over the course of 15 seconds for a 1.5 minute cooldown. Not really worth it for the damage, but fortunately this is still providing you Maelstrom for every couple seconds that they're out, so you are getting Maelstrom generation out of it. But this is more damage than what it's been previously. And now if you actually factor in the legendary for it, where you cut 2 seconds off the cooldown every single time you generate a Maelstrom weapon stack, you can get really close to you can probably hit about 80% uptime on elemental spirits because of the 30-second cooldown that comes with it. 80% uptime on your wolves, and so this actually ends up being a nice little damage increase across the board, pretty consistent. It becomes a very dependable cooldown, and this, you know, because it's up so much, you're actually constantly getting Maelstrom generation because of that as well. So it helps provide a little bit of fluidity to the playstyle, assuming you wanted to take that route with it. So those were the big ones. Now getting into the buffs on all of our talents. Blizzard is trying so hard to make a fire build work, but they are doing it the wrong way. They have buffed the duration of the Lava Lash buff for flame shock damage by, well, 8 seconds. Not really much. You know, it just lasts longer. So it lasts the full duration of a flame shock dot, at least. So, I mean, I guess that's cool if you're running it, but there's not really a reason to run it over either of these. Alongside that, they buffed the direct damage of Ice Strike by 75%. So it's actually hits, a decent amount for a single target ability, but it's still on a 13-second cooldown. And while it's cool that this resets the cooldown of our Flame Shock, reapplying Flame Shock directly manually, still not very fun, still feels really bad, very disruptive to the overall rotation of the build. Now, alongside that, they also buffed the damage of Fire Nova by 75%. So like I said, they are trying really hard to make a fire build work, but they're not doing it the right way. And Fire Nova, even with that 75% damage buff, still not worth taking because it's just way too disruptive, way too just not efficient, manually applying Flame Shock to every single target in order to get effective Fire Novas off. It's still very inferior to Hailstorm, which is a passive, and it doesn't require us to deviate from our rotation or playstyle at all. It's just something that you do normally because Frost Shock hits harder than Flame Shock directly, and you spend Maelstrom constantly, so you're just going to hit Frost Shock anyways to make it do more damage and be AoE. But we'll show you guys what it's like. So we'll open with the Flame Shock there. All right, we'll hit that there, get another Flame Shock there on the cooldown. All right, we'll get a third one up right here, and now we'll hit that Fire Nova. Boom. Okay, hey, cool, Fire Nova. It hit for 6k, but across 7 hits. So that only hit that hard because of, we had Fire Nova on all 3 targets, and it hit multiple targets for each one, whereas Frost Shock, still only hitting 3 times, did about the same amount of damage. So, and that required a lot of extra work to have happen there, and you're going to have those things get disrupted by having Stormbringer procs, by having Maelstrom procs, everything that's going on with it. It's a far too disruptive playstyle in order to get an effective situation out of it to really be worthwhile doing. And not to mention that Fire Nova still has a really long cooldown. We accidentally hit it there during this whole process of setting this up, but you can see Fire Nova still has a really long cooldown, and so that's still just not worth it. Even with 3 crits, it only hit for about 8k in an AoE situation, over 7 hits. So the damage on Fire Nova is still not worth it, especially with the 13-second cooldown, considering Frost Shock only has around a 5-second cooldown depending on your haste. So not only are you going to get off more hailstorms, it's going to be doing much more damage in an AoE situation and doesn't require a bunch of extra work in order to make it happen. So again, they're going about it the wrong way. Lashing Flames should honestly just spread Flame Shock to every target within a set radius like it used to. Lava Lash used to do that back in WoD. That was the era of Fire Nova. That was a time that people loved for it, and it was beautiful. Now, I don't know why they don't want to do that again, but they don't. So it's just what they're doing for it is not efficient, unfortunately. It's just not there. It's not worth it. So those were the primary main buffs. So just in general across the board, guys, overall, we got a really nice buff to our healing. We got a really nice buff to our Maelstrom weapon spending damage abilities, as well as the healing from that. A little bit of a nerf to the Forceful Winds and the Hailstorm, but still able to perform in the areas that they need to in an AoE situation. But even more so on top of that, the big damage increase to Elemental Blast makes it a really interesting choice for a single target situation over Forceful Winds, along with just the raw amount of damage that would do in a PvP situation. They also did a buff to the Night Fae Covenant. So the Night Fae Covenant is now going to, on a full channel, generate 3 stacks of Maelstrom. You know, I'm not a fan of the Night Fae Covenant. If you're an Enhancement Shaman, I don't know many who are, but if you are going Night Fae because you like the aesthetic of Night Fae and you want to be able to turn into a fox, even though you can already turn into a wolf, you know, hey, you do you. But your Night Fae ability, upon channeling it completely, is going to generate 3 stacks of Maelstrom weapon. They're trying to make up for the fact that you have to spend Exturation channeling the ability, but that just feels really bad. You're an Enhancement Shaman. You're supposed to be going bang, 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 cranking out abilities, not channeling an ability for multiple seconds. That's not really what you do as an Enhancement Shaman. So, you know, your whole point is to be doing stuff instantly. That's why you don't hard cast any abilities. It's really weird to have them go and give us something that requires us to hard channel it, considering the entire playstyle is based around instantaneous damage mechanics, and that's what the whole purpose is of Maelstrom weapon. But yeah, guys, those are the huge changes that we just got. A lot of interesting things coming out of it. I'm looking forward to a lot of these changes happening. For those of you who are curious, they actually updated the PTR to have the 9.0.2 build. So these class changes that are on the beta are now available on the PTR as well. So you do not need beta access in order to test these changes. So go ahead and hop on over to the PTR client if you want to check them out yourself as well with your current gear. And that is it for me, guys. If you enjoyed the stream, either one, go ahead and drop a sub down below. It would really help me out. And you can find us live on Twitch at twitch.tv/zav_. So go ahead and drop on by sometime. I'm always playing Enhancement Shaman. All right, have a good one, and we'll catch you in the maw.